Yo, what's up, guys? We're back for another breakdown and predictions video, and this week it's going to be for UFC Kansas City. Great main event with Max Holloway taking on Arnold Allen. The winner of that fight is, I guess, not in Max Holloway's case, but definitely in Arnold Allen's case, is going to be very close or in line next for a title shot if they get the victory. So, besides that, I got the PFL video up on the channel already, so make sure to check that out before the PFL event tomorrow to get some betting tips, get my predictions, and if you want to get access to my bets, go to patreon.com/MMA Prediction Guru. You're getting access to some of the best bets for MMA on the internet available. I got it all third-party tracked at betmma.tips, so you know that I'm legit. You can go check out my record over there, over 250 units profit. And besides that, man, make sure to support the channel with a like on this video. Put a comment down below. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I do breakdown and predictions video for every single UFC card. So besides that, let's get into this first fight of the night with Jocelyn Edwards against Lucy Pudilova. Pretty low-level fight that I'm not too interested in and from a betting perspective, but two girls that are fun to watch on their feet, so it should be an entertaining fight at least, hopefully. When you look at it, Jocelyn Edwards is the faster girl, more athletic, the better mover, and a little bit longer, so all that does lead to her early on in the fight at least getting the better of it, and I think she has better kicks and better footwork. Pudilova has good boxing and decent front kicks and leg kicks, and they both like to throw 1-2s and 3-2s. That's basically what they like to do, and usually they're the taller, longer girl in this fight. Obviously, they're the same height, but Pudilova has given up a little bit in the reach, and I think Pudilova is a little bit tougher, though. I think that she's a little bit more well-conditioned, so as the fight goes on and Pudilova continues that pressure, I think she could start to corral Edwards a little bit more and start to land a little bit more, and I think Edwards defensively is also a little bit worse than Pudilova. She likes to have a hands-down style, relies on speed, and I have seen her caught and dropped with the head kick and hurt with the head kick even in the UFC, and Pudilova does have the capability to throw those head kicks up high, so I would utilize that as part of my game plan in this fight if I was Pudilova. And one of the main things that I think Pudilova is going to try to exploit here is her wrestling advantage. She's definitely started relying on her wrestling more, even if you look at her fights outside the UFC when she got cut before she came back recently. And in her UFC debut, she's been getting takedowns. She has an okay double, decent takedowns against the cage. Nothing crazy, but I think Edwards' wrestling leaves a lot to be desired, and if Pudilova can get in on her, she could probably take her down. And Pudilova does have decent control, but Edwards has shown to be okay off her back with her submission grappling and her get-ups, and I think that could be the difference in the fight, just the cardio, the pressure, the occasional takedown or two from Pudilova, and maybe being a little bit more durable. So on optics, Pudilova could win it by moving forward and maybe getting a takedown or two, even if it's kind of a meaningless takedown. But I think this fight could go either way. Personally, I am going to side with the girl that I think is going to do a little bit more, be a little bit more active, and that's going to be Pudilova. This second fight of the night, this should be a really fun fight to watch, but from a betting perspective, it's really hard to give a solid breakdown. Both these guys are Muay Thai fighters, and I think if it's a straight stand-up fight, Gaston Bolanos has a big advantage. He has more high-level experience and is just a little bit more of a dynamic striker, but both guys are kind of flat-footed but pretty flowy. They like to pull counter, slip and rip, and they throw a lot of kicks, high kicks, elbows. So the striking should be fun to watch, and I think Phillips, he does have the advantage in terms of MMA experience and wrestling and grappling, but he's not necessarily an offensive wrestler, so I find it hard to envision him winning this fight off of getting takedowns, controlling on top. I think that he's going to have to catch a submission, which he does have the capability of doing. He does a good job of using submissions to create scrambles, but against a guy that's not as seasoned on the ground, maybe he could use those submissions more to finish the fight. And I think that that's his path to victory, is mixing it up. I don't think that he's going to be able to compete in a straight stand-up fight. But ultimately, I kind of see it being more of a stand-up battle because that's just how Aaron Phillips tends to get down. And Aaron Phillips is also a guy that is going to have a bit of a mental block with the UFC because he has had 3 opportunities to win in the UFC. He's 0-3. That could potentially mess with him a little bit. And I'm not necessarily that enthralled with Bolanos as far as the MMA prospect. I think his striking is really high level and fun to watch, but I think as he moves up in the rankings or even in this fight, he could get exposed. So I would never warrant a bet on Bolanos, especially as an almost 2-1 favorite. But I am going to pick him to win this fight via knockout. And we got some Brazil versus Brazil violence in this third fight with 2 girls that are pretty new in the UFC. Denise Gomes had 1 UFC fight so far against Saloma Lukbunmi, which is a hell of a way to get invited into the octagon. And Bruna Brazil is going to be making her UFC debut here. Interesting matchup because it's 2 strikers, but 2 very different strikers. We got a short, compact girl in Denise Gomes who wants to get on the inside, throw punches in bunches, throw elbows. She has good spinning elbows and very durable. She keeps the pressure. And Bruna Brazil, on the other hand, is tall, long, rangy. She likes to be in and out with her striking, keep it on the outside, throw more kicks. She has that patented high kick, which she got a knockout with on the Contender Series, and has had several times where she hurt fighters and finished them with that head kick in the past as well. And looking at the matchup, I mean, I feel like Brazil early is going to have a big advantage in terms of speed, footwork, technical striking. I think Denise Gomes, when she gets on the inside, is going to have a pretty significant advantage, but she's a little bit plotty. I don't really like her footwork too much. I think she can be a little bit slow, and she's definitely hittable as she tries to come inside. So Brazil is going to capitalize on a lot of that, I feel like. But as the fight goes on, if Brazil starts to get a little bit tired, I could see Gomes beginning to go to work with the punches and bunches on the inside with the elbows. I could even see her getting a takedown or 2. Brazil's grappling to me is a little bit suspect, and I'm not saying Gomes is the best wrestler or grappler, but I think she has better wrestling and grappling than Brazil. Brazil does have a good guillotine, but I think Gomes, if she can get her tired with the pressure and put her on her back, that could go a long way towards her getting the victory. It's just whether you think Gomes is going to have enough success being able to track down Brazil, or is Brazil going to be able to just pick her off for 3 rounds? I'm going to go with the girl that's a little bit more technical in Brazil, a little bit bigger, taller. I think she's the better athlete. But I wouldn't be shocked if this fight goes either way. I think this is a fight that is close. I think it's going to be a striking fight that's going to be competitive as well. But I'm going to go with Brazil here to win 29-28 on the scorecards. Next one, this is another fight that's just pretty tough to break down here. We got the veteran Lando Vannata. He's taking on Daniel Zellhuber. And Daniel Zellhuber, he came into the UFC with a lot of hype, but he dropped the ball. Trey Ogden, he was a huge favorite in that one, and Ogden was able to squeak by on a decision, mainly because Zellhuber didn't throw any strikes or wasn't very active, didn't look like his old self. Lando Vannata, he's been really up and down in the UFC. He's had some good performances. He's had some bad performances. I don't necessarily think the move to 145 went like he thought it did. He got submitted in his last fight against Charles Jourdain and decided to move back up to 155 here. So he's going to be competing at the weight class that I think is probably a little better for him, even though I do think that he's undersized at 155. And when you look at this matchup, he's going to be significantly shorter. He's going to have a 6-inch reach disadvantage. Zellhuber's a tall, long guy in general for the weight. But I do like Zellhuber in the matchup. I just think it's a hard to trust him after him shitting the bed so bad in his debut. Is he going to be able to let his offense go, or is he going to have that same mental block in this fight? I'm going to kind of chalk that up to UFC jitters and that being his debut, and I think he's going to come in looking different here. And I also feel like it's a different opponent. When you look at Trey Ogden, we even saw Trey Ogden's last fight against Ignacio Bahamondes. He tends to really be low volume, not engage too much, and I think Daniel Zellhuber fell into the trap of kind of leveling down to Trey Ogden and not throwing as much volume as he should, not being as active as he should, and kind of got picked off with the jabs and the check hooks and let Ogden minimally out-volume him in a boring fight. I think he was also a little bit weary of the takedown, and Lando Vannata, he's not going to fight like that. Lando Vannata is going to go in. He's going to give him a battle. He's not going to be working the jab. I rarely ever see Vannata throwing shots to the lead hand too much, honestly. It's mostly, I mean, you'll throw some combinations off the lead hand, but he's not throwing a steady jab, steady check hook diet. And he tends to have that hands down, explode in, explode out style where I feel Zellhuber could pick him apart with his length and his boxing combinations, his pressure, his ability to read distance. And I do think Zellhuber has good enough takedown defense in this fight and get up ability if he does get taken down to contend with Vannata's wrestling, which I think is underrated. But Vannata, his last fight, tried to come in with the real wrestling heavy game plan, got submitted, so I don't necessarily even know how confident he's going to be with his grappling in this fight. I think it is going to be potentially something he could bring out in his back pocket, and if he could take down Zellhuber, I could see that really making Zellhuber's offense minimized like we saw in the Trey Ogden fight. But if this becomes more of a trademark Lando fight where it gets a little crazy, I think that the cleanness of Zellhuber is going to win him those exchanges. I think that his youthfulness and just durability advantage is going to be able to get him through and be a little bit more competitive and a little bit more sound in those later rounds in a war. I think Vannata, with all the wear and tear that he's had, could potentially wear down a little bit more than a Zellhuber. And I'm going to go with Zellhuber here. He has to get the victory. He's coming off a poor performance in his debut, which I'm sure he wants to get the bad taste out of his mouth from that. And I think he's going to let his shots go. I think he's going to make it more of a Mexican-style fight, and I see him getting the better of it. So I'm going to pick Zellhuber to win this via decision in a pretty one-sided fight, but I think it'll be fun, and I think Vannata will have moments, but I think Zellhuber will clearly win. And in this next fight, we got a women's fight between Jillian Robertson and Piera Rodriguez. Jillian Robertson, after a pretty good career at 125, she has the most finishes ever in that weight class. I think she has the most submission wins in UFC history for any weight class for a female, and she's decided to make the move down to 115 though, and I think that's a good move. I think she was pretty small for 125. She didn't have much of a weight cut at all, so I don't think the cut to 115 is going to be a big deal, and she looks shredded. She looks in great shape, so I think with her style as well, if she can get these smaller girls to the ground, she could probably control them and finish them a little bit easier, and she was already doing a good job of that at 125, but she's facing an undefeated fighter here in Piera Rodriguez, who's had a lot of recent experience against girls that want to take her down and out-wrestle her, and she's flipped the script on them and took them down, was able to show that she has wrestling of her own, grappling of her own, and she's undefeated and confident, so it's definitely going to be a scrap in there, and we're going to see who's going to implement and kind of impose their will in this fight. And on the feet, I think Jillian Robertson definitely has improved, and you see that she's gotten a little bit better with her footwork and her jabs and just her hands in general, but she still has rudimentary striking, and Rodriguez, even though her striking I don't believe is that effective either, I think that she has much more power. She throws much better combinations more fluidly on the inside, and she's going to be the girl that's going to be pressuring and being the bully in the fight. So I think if it stays standing, I think Rodriguez can have a major advantage. I also think Rodriguez is going to mix in some calf kicks, which could potentially pay big dividends in the fight. And you're looking at Jillian Robertson. She's one-dimensional. You know what she wants to do. She wants to get that single leg. She wants to pull guard and kind of get that arm drag or the half guard sweep. And once she gets on top, she's a beast, man. She'll transition from position to position. She'll wear you out. She has some of the best rear naked chokes when she gets to the back in the game for female fighting. And you see her even beast girls in jiu-jitsu all the time. So she's definitely improving all the time with her jiu-jitsu skill. And I think, like I said, at 115, it's going to be even more pronounced if she can get on top of these girls. But her wrestling isn't really that refined. She does have a decent single, but I feel like Rodriguez's wrestling is underrated. She's gotten at least 5 takedowns, I believe, in her last 3 fights, and she was able to out-wrestle, out-grapple Kay Hansen, who I don't think is on the same level as Jillian, but similar kind of proximity of a fighter. And when you're looking at Rodriguez, I think that she does have the ability to stuff the takedowns and even get takedowns of her own. I think she can get a takedown or two at the end of rounds. I wouldn't advise getting takedowns with a lot of time to work because it could lead to you getting swept or getting reversed and allowing Robertson into a dominant position. But if you have 30, 45 seconds in a round and you think you can get a takedown to make it super definitive, then go for it, and I think you could potentially get him. I don't necessarily think Robertson has super high-level takedown defense, and I think Rodriguez has the superior wrestling. So I feel like Robertson has a path to victory. I mean, if she can get on top of any girl in the UFC at 15s or 25, she could finish them. But I feel as if Rodriguez is going to be able to get the win in this one. I know a lot of people are siding with Robertson. The line's flipped and she's the favorite now. But I think a lot of that is also due to name recognition and just her having a lot more fights and experience in the UFC. But I think Rodriguez is the more well-rounded girl. And I think that she's going to be able to keep it standing for the most part. She might get a takedown over two of her own, but I think she'll dictate where the fight plays out. And I see her being the better striker, getting the job done here in a decision. So I'm going to go with Pierre Rodriguez. And up next here we got two vets, super vets, with Zach Cummings and Ed Herman. Ed Herman is one of the longest tenured fighters in the UFC currently. He's been in the UFC since 2006. And Zach Cummings has been in the UFC for over 10 years at this point. But, man, personally, I don't get the line in this fight. How could you have Zach Cummings as over 2-1 favorite? I think there's a lot of red flags with Zach Cummings coming into this fight. I mean, he hasn't fought in almost 3 years. He's moving up to 205 pounds. He had a severe back injury that had him bedridden for months, he said. He hasn't been able to train and just now is getting back into it. And a lot of that to me is very, very suspect. And even though Ed Herman is 42 years old, hasn't fought in over a year, he isn't looking that bad. I mean, when he got in there with Khalil Roundtree, he was able to be competitive in that fight. And he's been fighting at 205. He's used to fighting up at this weight, even though he's also a 185er that moved up. I think he obviously has the big experience fighting 20 pounds heavier. And ultimately, I just don't see a lot of difference with these guys in how they fight. I mean, you see Zach Cummings, low volume guy that tries to land that counter check hook or the straight left hand, and he has some power. I guess his last fight he landed that kind of lucky head kick, but Ed Herman, he is more active with the jab. He throws way more kicks and volume in general. I think that Cummings is a little bit more defensively responsible and a little bit more powerful probably, but he's not necessarily a big knockout guy or power threat either. I think leg kicks for both guys are going to be effective, and whoever implements that could potentially get ahead if they do it in a good manner. But the clinch, I think, is Ed Herman all day. I think he has the advantage in the clinch. And in terms of the grappling, Zach Cummings has a good submission game, especially with the front chokes, so he might be a little bit more crafty in that area, but I don't see him submitting Ed Herman. Ed Herman hasn't been submitted in forever, and I just don't see this hitting the ground or being that much of a grappling fight. I see it being more of a striker's fight, stand up, and I'm going to edge it towards Ed Herman with the volume, with the jab. I think that he's going to have that slight reach. He could also use the clinch and wear on Cummings in the clinch a little bit, land some shots. And I know both guys are really old, so I'm kind of throwing that out as a wash a little bit. And I feel like Cummings has way more red flags coming into the fight with the back injury. That's pretty major. And I think Herman has the ability to get the job done here. So especially at the price tags that both these guys are sitting at, I think Ed Herman is a no-brainer. So I'm going to pick Ed Herman to get the victory in this one by decision. In this next fight, we got one of the best fights on the card with Brandon Royval taking on Matheus Nicolau. And man, I mean, first of all, the UFC is doing these guys dirty with the positioning on the card. These guys should be the co-main event. They should be on the main card at bare minimum. These are two of the highest ranked fighters on the card. And the flyweights, they never get that respect, man, but they always bring it, and this is no different. This should be a hell of a scrap right here. Two guys that are super high level. and two guys that are close to the belt. I mean, the winner of this fight could potentially be next, especially with Davison kind of, even though he's coming back to 125, I guess if Starboy Manel Cape, if he can beat him, then he might be the next guy. But I think that potentially there is a big possibility that the winner of this fight fights for the title in their next match. And when you're looking at it stylistically, it's a great fight because both these guys are very different from each other. You got Brandon Royval, who's a kinetic fighter, a guy that goes in there and tries to create chaos, be really wild. And Matheus Nicolau likes to fight at a slow pace, very technical, and he likes to kind of slow the fight down, whereas Royval is willing to take way more risks in the fight. So looking at it stylistically, I feel like early on, the technicality of Nicolau could potentially get him ahead because I think that he's just a lot cleaner with his footwork. He has great counter ability with his hands, nice ability to land counter 1-2s, 3-2s, and I think that he could land some clean counters. And Nicolau does have some power. We saw that in the fight with Matt Schnell, and we've seen it in previous fights. And I think that he could even sit down or hurt Royval, but it's unlikely that he's going to knock Royval out, I don't believe. And Royval is a guy that has incredible cardio training up there in Colorado and a great heart, so he's not just going to lay down and roll over. And I think that Nicolau is going to struggle to keep that pace and volume on the feet. We saw the Tim Elliott fight. He started to get backed up and out-volumed a little bit in the second and third rounds, and he was able to get a takedown to bail himself out. And I think that the wrestling and control, if he can't control, is going to be what gets him the victory, because I feel like the striking, it's kind of early on, I could see him being effective and maybe even getting the knockout if he's lucky. But I think as the fight goes on, I think Royval, with his long-range striking, stance switching, ability to land that left hand to the body, to the head really effectively from far out too, landing knees, landing kicks, and just putting the pressure on, backing Nicolau up, I think all that is going to lend towards Royval winning the fight and maybe even getting the finish. We've seen Nicolau have a little bit of a suspect chin, if you ask me. He's been finished by strikes in a couple of his losses. And as far as the wrestling and grappling goes, I do believe that Nicolau probably is the better wrestling, and he could get a takedown or two in this fight. And Royval is a guy that when you take him down, he's always attacking the legs, trying to attack the legs to create a scramble, which does sometimes lead towards you giving your back, which we saw Alexandre Pantoja take advantage of and submit him. But Royval, it also leads to him being extremely hard to take down or hold down, and he's just cardio is on infinite levels, so he could just scramble and scramble. When he gets on top, he can do the business with his own submission game and with his ground and pound. And I just feel like he's going to do more than Nicolau in this fight. I know Nicolau's 9-0 in decisions, and Royval's a little bit suspect in decisions, but I think that Royval could finish him, and I think he could decision him too. I just think that Royval is going to do a little bit more. I think Nicolau is not going to let the volume go, even though he might be the better fighter. I feel like he's going to get outworked in this one, and I see Nicolau just kind of losing the fight because Royval on optics is going to be pressuring, he's going to be landing more and doing a little bit more. He's going to be wild and a little bit more flashy, dynamic for the fans and get some pops. So I'm going to go with Royval to get the upside in this one and pick up the victory. So give me Brandon Royval here. And with this next fight, I don't got too much to say about this one. I think the line kind of has gotten out of hand, but I'm pretty solid on Bill Algeo. I think he's going to get the job done. And these guys are fairly similar in terms of their footwork on the feet. They like to stance switch, and they're kind of fluid. But I think Bill Algeo is way more awkward. I mean, the guy has a real wide bladed stance, and he'll throw some real weird kicks from both sides. He has kind of odd counter-punching ability, and he's hard to deal with, man. I think his leg kicks are going to come into play in this one, and his length and just awkwardness, I feel like, are also going to be an advantage that he has. He's also very durable. He's willing to take shots to give shots, and he's dangerous with the knees. So Algeo's tough to deal with on the feet, and I feel like he's just a little bit better than TJ Brown on the feet. TJ Brown, a little more basic half kick game, 1-2-3-2 game, and pretty explosive guy. I do think he's faster and more powerful. So early in the fight, I think he could potentially land some shots, and I think Brown's going to try to get some takedowns, and his wrestling is good. I think he maybe could get a couple takedowns, but Algeo, he's one of these guys that's just excellent at scrambling on the ground and getting back up to his feet. And I think the durability and the pace of Algeo are going to be something that TJ Brown can't really match. I think Brown may get hurt a few times or show leg kick damage and things like that. And whereas I feel Algeo will stay a little bit tougher. And I also think Algeo will have a little bit more gas on the stretch, put a little bit more volume out there. I think Brown may get a couple takedowns, but they'll be ineffective. And I think that Algeo is going to have a chance to get a late finish, but more than likely, I think it'll be a decision victory for Bill Algeo, which is what he usually gets. I just think he's going to outwork TJ Brown, be a little bit slicker on the feet, and if he gets taken down, he's going to nullify the takedowns by being able to get back up and not let Brown do much with the top position. So I'm going to go with Bill Algeo in this one. I think he could kind of show a similar performance to the one he did against Joe Anderson Brito here. And this next fight, this is another tough one, man. Clay Guida versus Rafa Garcia. These guys are kind of mirror images of each other where they like to move around on the outside, and I think Guida is a little bit better of a pressure fighter and a little bit superior wrestler, but Garcia at this stage in his career is a little bit faster, more mobile, and he probably is the guy that has more power as well. So it's going to be interesting how these guys match up. I think Garcia is obviously going to be looking for that check hook like he always does in that rear cross. And he's coming off a good performance in his last one where he fought a tall guy that was probably tough to deal with in Mahishata. Got a big cut, but was able to battle through it. Got a lot of takedowns and got the victory. But all his wins so far, it's been mainly through him getting a lot of takedowns or mixing it up, takedowns and striking. And I don't necessarily see him being able to take down Clay that effectively or control him on the ground. And I do see that Garcia has quite a few submission victories, and obviously if he can hurt Clay, he could club and sub him, and Clay is someone that's been submitted a lot of times. But most of Garcia's submission wins are against real low-level Mexican fighters that probably had no grappling at all, and Guida usually gets submitted against high-level grapplers, so I think that it's probably unlikely he'll get submitted. But for Guida, I think wrestling is going to be a big part of the game plan because I think he is going to believe that he could take Garcia down. And if he can mix it up, we have seen Garcia's gas tank kind of befall him in the past. And if one thing you know about Clay Guida, the guy does not get tired. He's going to push the pace. So that's probably going to be a big game plan for Guida, just trying to be sharp, use the counter crosses because Garcia throws a lot of round punches, and I think Guida is a little bit better with the straight shots and mixing the wrestling too. But Guida is going to have to get by that check hook, which I think could land and could land significantly. And if Garcia can pressure Guida and stuff the takedowns, I think it could be a longer night for Guida than he thinks it could be. So, man, I'm kind of conflicted on this fight. And, you know, I think the line, you got to go with Clay Guida, like if you're looking at it from a betting perspective. But as a pick perspective, I'm going to go with the younger guy. I'm going to pick Rafa Garcia to grit it out and get the win. And I don't think he's going to finish Clay. I don't think he has the power to necessarily knock him out. And I don't think he has that submission game to submit him. Guida is really tough to finish with strikes. But I just think he might win a close decision. I think it could be similar to that Madsen fight. But, man, I mean, I think Guida could get the job done here. So, at plus over 200, I think he definitely is a decent bet. But I'm going to go with Rafa Garcia as the official pick. And up next in this fight, we got Pedro Munhoz versus Chris Gutierrez. This should be a banger right here. Anytime Pedro Munhoz gets in there, guaranteed brawl is usually going to happen. And Chris Gutierrez is a real slick striker in his own right. And, man, I mean, both these guys are kind of in different parts of their careers. You see Chris Gutierrez is peaking right now. He's on a long win streak. He's coming off that real dominant knockout victory over Frankie Edgar. Pedro Munhoz, he's been losing recently. He had the no contest against Sean O'Malley in his last fight, but he's been fighting that super high-level competition, whereas Chris Gutierrez, to be fair, has been fighting some really low-level fighters, and he's gotten a couple of split decisions over guys that are not that good, so it's a little bit suspect. But he's getting a different matchup in this fight with Pedro. And, man, I mean, when you look at it, it's a calf-kicking fan's delight right here with both these guys. And it's going to be pretty obvious what they both want to do. Munhoz is going to have to close that distance, get on the inside where he can land those calf kicks, land that front kick to the body, and the big hooks and overhands on the inside. And he's going to have to figure out how to cut the cage off and minimize that speed and footwork advantage that Gutierrez has, because Gutierrez is going to be way faster. He's a little bit taller and longer and slicker as well in terms of pure striking. So he's going to be moving and grooving on the outside. I think he's going to fight very smart here. I don't think he's going to look for the finish. I don't think he's going to be super aggressive. I think he's going to just touch and go and look to land those calf kicks, the front kicks, the head kicks, look to land those pull counters with the straight punches, look to land the jab, look to land that cross, and just use his speed to just touch and move on Pedro all day, who's a kind of a walking punching bag at times. No offense to him, but his defense is very bad, and he also is super durable, so you know he's going to be there. So you have to be in shape to move for 3 rounds if that's going to be the game plan for Gutierrez, which he is. He trains out of Colorado, and a lot of these guys are on this fight card together, so you have to imagine that the vibe in the gym has been really good, and they've been putting in some real hard work. And I just have to lean towards Gutierrez because I do think Munhoz is the more well-rounded fighter, and if he can get in on the inside, it'll be tougher. It could knock him out, but you have to rely on a finish from Munhoz, I believe. I think that if it goes 3 rounds, I think that Gutierrez is going to get the job done. And I don't expect Pedro to bring out the wrestling shoes and get the takedowns in this one. If I did kind of have an inclination that he could get some takedowns, then I would pick him to win here, because I do think that he has a huge grappling advantage, and those front chokes and the guillotines, especially from Munhoz, have been proven to be deadly in MMA. But I just don't think he's going to be able to get his grappling going. I don't think he's even going to try. And I just think Gutierrez is going to be smart with his game plan. He's going to be fast. He's going to be moving and grooving on the outside. Not let Pedro Munhoz get that pocket fight that he wants. Don't let him get off the leg kicks, because if he does, then you could be in trouble. But I think he's going to be smart with it, move and groove on him, and get the win by decision. So I'm going to go with Chris Gutierrez, but it's a fight where it's a dog or pass, I believe, with Pedro having all the experience. And if he can land some leg kicks and wear down Gutierrez, I think he could win in a dog fight type of scenario. I also think he's the more well-rounded fighter. So I think Munhoz has passed to victory, but ultimately I'm going to side with Chris Gutierrez. And this next fight, man, this is an offensive fight to me that I don't want anything to do with. Tanner Boser against Iwan Cutelaba. We got Boser coming down to 205 after he was one of the smallest heavyweights on the roster. It seemed inevitable that he was going to make the move down, and he finally has. And Iwan Cutelaba, he's been entertaining, but been one of the most inconsistent. I guess you can't say inconsistent. He's been one of the most consistent UFC fighters on the roster, where you know what you're going to get out of him. You're going to get a big first round, then you're going to get a huge cardio dump, and you're going to either get him finished or he's going to lose a decision or get a draw in the case of the fight with Dustin Jacoby. But, man, I mean, I can't trust Boser either. Boser in his last fight lost to Rodrigo Nascimento, who I don't rate that highly as a fighter. I think Boser's takedown defense is really suspect. And we've seen Iwan Cutelaba fight a similar guy in Dustin Jacoby, a fighter that likes to move around, use the jab, use the low kicks. And Cutelaba had fairly good success with his overhands and his kind of hooks and crosses in that fight. He was able to get takedowns. He won the first round 10-8. And Boser, I think, on the inside is a little bit more dangerous than Jacoby with the knees. And he has these bursts where he can land these short flurries that have power. But I could see him getting grinded out for 2 rounds and then winning the 3rd round if he can't get the finish, losing a close decision. I could see Cutelaba blasting him out of there in the 1st round too. I don't know necessarily how is Boser going to look with the weight cut. Is he going to be compromised from the weight cut? But ultimately, if this fight stays standing for a pronounced period of time, I think Boser's slickness is a little bit superior to Iwan. I think that he has a nice jab. I think that he has good low kicks and counter hooks, and he just is a little bit cleaner. But Boser isn't anything special to me either. The one major advantage that Boser holds is the cardio, where I think if he can survive a first round or first round and a half of takedowns and things like that and somehow get back up to his feet, which his get-up game is not very good when he gets taken down, but if he could, then I think he could start to take over the fight and finish the fight. And it's just really hard for me to trust Iwan Cutelaba to get the victory in any sort of scenario. So ultimately, I am going to pick Boser by second or third round finish or decision. But man, I don't feel good about this pick, and I'm not confident on either guy getting the job done. So I don't really know. I'm just going to go with Boser because I think he has the better cardio and probably is the tougher guy. But yeah, I could see Cutelaba getting the win too, but I'm going to side with Boser here. And for this next fight, we got two athletic light heavyweights, Dustin Jacoby taking on Azamat Murzakonov. Personally, I feel like Murzakonov should move down to 185. I think that he's way undersized, and he's going to be pretty significantly undersized in this fight as well, with the 5.5-inch reach disadvantage being 4 or 5 inches shorter as well. And when you look at it, both these guys tend to like to strike. I've seen Murzakonov have fights against Guida and Ascension and certain guys where he was able to hit takedowns, and maybe he'll try to get takedowns in this fight against Jacoby. Obviously, we've seen Jacoby struggle with that in the past. When we look at most of his losses, they've came against wrestlers. But most of the time, Murzakonov likes to strike, and I don't know if he's going to be effective in being able to out wrestle and take down Jacoby for 3 straight rounds, who Jacoby has improved on that aspect of his game quite a bit. And the guys that Murzakonov has been able to do that too, I haven't really rated the highest in terms of wrestling and grappling acumen. And Jacoby, he has some motivation coming in here, coming off that loss that's very suspect over Khalil Roundtree that a lot of people thought he won, which snapped a big winning streak for him. And I've seen him calling out Pereira, so he's super confident. He's trying to get that knockout loss back. Murzakonov, he's coming off that real cool knockout over Devin Clark, so he has some momentum coming in here. And both these guys are pretty dynamic strikers for the weight. I definitely think Jacoby is the superior striker. Murzakonov is explosive. We saw in his last fight he landed that flying knee, and he can land some dynamic attacks sometimes. But most of the time, Murzakonov's just looking for that left overhand, and he does kind of leave himself susceptible to counters when he throws it. Whereas Jacoby, he's a stance switcher. He's always making reads. He's throwing leg kicks, front kicks. He's throwing switch kicks. He is very good with his knees up the middle, counter punching ability, 1-2s, real nice jab, and he stays defensively responsible and smart too. He has good distance control. His chin is also on point, so he could take shots, but he does sometimes get hit a little bit more than I like, and he's gotten hurt in a couple recent fights, so I think that he has to avoid that power and explosiveness of Murzakonov, but I think with his length and his size, the stand-up is going to be his world. I think he'll be able to control that distance and be able to land more often and a little bit cleaner. And I think Murzakonov is going to leave himself susceptible to a lot of counters when he throws that overhand left. But if he can land clean, he could take Jacoby out. I think it's unlikely because Jacoby does have a very good chin. And I don't see Murzakonov being able to out-wrestle him here and take him down for 3 rounds. So I am leaning towards the Jacoby side to take away that undefeated record from Murzakonov. And I'm going to pick him to win this fight. So I'm picking Jacoby to bounce back here and get that W. And in the co-main event here, we got a straight-up banger with Edson Barboza against Billy Quarantillo. And I'm surprised to see everyone throwing so much dirt on Edson Barboza being so confident in Billy Q this week, because I don't really agree with that. I mean, you look at his fights against strikers recently. I mean, he was able to take out Shane Burgos Barboza. He won the second round against Chikadze. Ended up getting finished in the third, lost the first. But his last fight, he fought Bryce Mitchell, who's a specialist, good wrestler. And he did get dropped in that fight, but I think that was more because he was worried about the takedown. And I don't think Billy Q, even though he has decent wrestling and grappling ability, and I think his big part of his game plan is going to be to push the ability to try to mix it up, even if he fails takedowns, and just wear on Edson's gas tank. But I think Edson is probably going to be able to keep it on the feet much more and have more of the fight that he likes in this one. and he's facing a very, very hittable guy. So Barboza is live in that scenario and against anybody. And obviously, being 37 years old, the damage is getting up there for him, and eventually he's going to start to really, really go on the decline. So we could see that in this fight, and people could end up being right. And Billy Q is a guy that's been up and down in the UFC, but he's always produced bangers, and he's always been a guy that is going to go in there and give you a show. So he tends to get dropped early in a lot of his fights, which against Barboza, if he gets hurt early, definitely could get finished because Barboza is a hell of a finisher. But once he weathers that storm, gets his reads, and starts coming at you, he's a storm that is hard to weather himself. And he starts going to the body, coming up to the head. He throws nice punches in combination. He has the stance switching ability and the kind of weird looping overhands that he connects with. He'll throw decent kicks as well. And he mixes it up. He'll mix in some level changes, try to take you down. He has a black belt, I believe. And his gas tank and offense and just staying in your face and wearing on you beats a lot of guys. And traditionally, Barboza is a guy that's worn down against pressure and not done the best against that style. But the thing is, Billy Q tends to get dropped a lot, like I said, very hittable. And if Barboza can land clean, get his timing with his boxing and start to really box up Billy Q and movement going, land some kicks, he could potentially get into the fight too. And both these guys are really tough. You're going to see a big reach advantage for Edson that I think early on could potentially play a big factor. But ultimately, I am going to side with the favorite of the week here and go with Billy Q because I do think Edson is kind of moving into that washed up territory potentially. He's taking a lot of damage, and I think Billy Q could wear him down. I think he is going to mix in some level changes, hold him against the cage. He's going to be able to land some punches, and maybe he'll get him out of there in the later rounds. I think that if Edson can't get him out of there early, he could wilt and get finished, and I think that's probably the better bet to make. Fight doesn't go to decision as opposed to betting a side, in my opinion. But I'm going to go with Billy Q via second or third round KO, TKO. And finally, we got the main event. We got Max Holloway taking on Arnold Allen. Another potential changing of the guard fight where Max Holloway's defending his spot like he did against Calvin Kattar, like he did against Yair Rodriguez. And we're going to see if he can do it again against Arnold Allen, who's surging. He's on a 10-fight winning streak. And he's someone that has been overlooked just because of his inactivity, not fighting the best guys. But now he's getting that motherfucker of the division. He's getting Max Holloway. He's getting the guy that's beaten really everyone except for Alexander Volkanovski. And we're going to see if he could pass that test. Because if he can, then he's definitely going to be fighting for the belt next, if you ask me. And Max Holloway is still on that quest to wear UFC gold again. It's going to be tough, and we're going to have to see exactly where his heart and motivation is after the third loss to Volkanovski, because obviously that makes it a lot harder for him to get the belt again. But he just saw Israel Adesanya get that win. That is a lot of added motivation most likely for him, and we're going to see what he does with that. But as far as the matchup goes, it's going to be a striking fight, and it's going to be a boxing fight, which is going to be fun to watch, especially for me who's a fan of boxing. And early on, I think Arnold Allen's going to be a little bit faster, the better mover, and a little bit slicker. And Max does not want to stay in the pocket with Arnold early in the fight. I think he wants to be smart, stay in and out, use his feints, high guard, pressure, back up Allen, wear on that gas tank by making him move backwards, because Allen does start fast but tends to slow down. And obviously Max has some of the best cardio that we've ever seen. And that's something that he definitely needs to do here, because if he goes out there early and tries to get right in the pocket, exchange with Allen finds those slick counter punches with the left hand, and he's super accurate. Once he has you moving backwards or kind of on the defensive, he can land those real slick, long combinations like we saw against Dan Hooker. Very dangerous guy, and he's big for the weight, so he packs a lot of power. So I think early in the fight, Max definitely has to respect that. But I just see as the fight goes on, Max is going to be the one that gets better and moves into the fight, and Arnold's going to slow down. I think that Max is going to have success backing Allen up, and maybe early on you'll get countered, you'll get clipped a little bit and struggle to land meaningful offense as often as Allen does. I think as the fight goes on, we're going to see Max Holloway start to attack the body, move up to the head, be a lot more active and aggressive, land a lot more often on Allen, and I think we're going to see Allen start to fade a little bit. And I also think Max could mix in some takedowns like he did against Yair Rodriguez here, surprise Allen a little bit by getting him off his feet or at least making him defend some takedowns. And just, I think, his veteran savvy, all the years of him having 5-round fights, fighting the best of the best, is going to have to play a factor in this fight. I know Allen is the younger guy that's on the win streak, on a run, that maybe should be the favored guy that gets the win in this one. But I think that Max Holloway is going to be able to get the job done. I think he's going to be able to look fairly dominant down the stretch. I see Arnold Allen kind of wilting a little bit, and I could even see Max finishing him in those later rounds. I think that Allen's best chance of winning is getting him out of there and cracking that chin, and we know Holloway has one of the best chins in MMA history. And obviously, you could make an argument that he's on the downslide after those couple losses to Alex and having a bad performance his last fight. But I think he's going to come back and show everyone that he's still around. He's still going to be a factor in the division and maybe even get that title again. So I have to go with Holloway in this one. I know Allen is a popular underdog and he's someone that is the fighter that's with the momentum coming into the fight, but I just think Max Holloway is that next level up. I think he's going to be able to exploit and expose that gas tank Allen that I think is a little bit suspect, and I feel like ultimately he is going to be able to get the job done by decision in this one. So I'm going to go with Max Holloway to get the win here, and that's the full card breakdown for UFC Kansas City. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Like I said at the beginning of the video, make sure to hit that like button and comment down below. It really helps out the channel and helps more people find these videos. I'm going to try to drop the UFC video earlier next week, but just had a lot going on this week, and this is when I had time to put it out. So don't grill me and hate me too much for putting it out so late. You still got quite a bit of time to watch before the fights. Hopefully you can get around to it. So thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting the channel like always. And go to the Patreon. I got a couple bets on the UFC. I got some bets on LFA already. Got some bets on PFL. And I'm going to be looking into that Cage Warriors card. There's a Fury FC card too. So a lot going on like always in the MMA world. Patreon.com/MMA Prediction Guru is the spot to be for all the best bets and all the best betting tips. And I think it's definitely worth your while to go over there and make some money. And besides that, man, for the parlay of the week this week, I'm going to go with Max Holloway and Bill Algeo. For my most confident pick of the week, I'm going to go with Max Holloway. And I think this is a card that's a little bit suspect in terms of parlaying. I wouldn't throw too many parlays out there, but I think there's a couple good underdogs, and I think it's going to be an entertaining fight card. So we're going to have fun watching it on Saturday. I'm going to be back on the channel breaking down a fight card next week, so make sure to stay locked in, and I'll talk to you guys later.